of Management Studies, IGNOU presents an audiobook on the course MMPC 003 Business Environment for MBA program. Presenting Block 2, Overview of Indian Economy, Unit-6, Industrial Policy Framework. After completing this unit, you should be able to trace the evolution of industrial policy in India, describe the framework of industry policy formulation in India, identify the gaps in previous industrial policies and the need for new industrial policy, analyze the benefits and gaps of the present industrial policy, draw a comparison between state-specific industrial policies in India, and assess the importance of other policies supplementing the industrial policy. Introduction. Industrial development is aimed to achieve economic prosperity and improving the lives of its people. India left no stone unturned to brace and strengthen its industrial development, for which the quest started after independence in 1947. The initially conceived policy, the Industrial Policy Resolution of 1948, outlined and defined the role of the state in industrial development, both as an entrepreneur and authority. For a stringent framework and better implementation of the industrial policy, enactment of Industries Development and Regulation Act 1951, referred to as IDR Act, followed. This also allowed Union government to invest directly into preferred areas of industrial activity through the mechanism of licensing and keeping abreast with national development objectives. To fast-track industrialization and to place India among global competitors, it was imperative to achieve sustainable growth, optimum utilization of resources, and growth in production with a focus on best possible utilization of human resources and international competitiveness. To achieve sustainable growth, the policy explored prospects to deregulate Indian industry while easing restrictions. Since 1991, economic reforms envisioned new and substantial role for private entities. In view of this, the policy has been progressively liberalized over the years. You will learn more about it in the upcoming section. Industrial Policy Framework and Features. Indian economy was being built into a self-reliant and self-sustained unit with an aim to achieve industry-led growth. The policy environment relied on import substitution, inward growth and subsidization. Public sector in India soon witnessed a phenomenal expansion and economic prosperity. However, it came to be afflicted with infirmities. At this point in time, it was realized that there was a need to make the public sector market-oriented. Hence, well-balanced improvements were needed to reformulate the policy accordingly. Public sector played a supportive role in the new policy framework, but the initiative for growth was to be commenced from the private capital and enterprise. And so, the actual reformation started after 1995 and was influenced by three factors. Number 1, young entrepreneurs entered a competitive economy. Number 2, tariff rates started dropping down along with quantitative import restrictions becoming history. And number 3, MNCs started entering India in greater numbers and created a competitive landscape from within. Not just these factors, but there are a handful of other aspects that affected the industrial policy, thereby impacting investment and production. Some of these were industrial licensing policy, control of monopolies and economic concentration, policies regarding technology import, along with financial and fiscal policies affecting the provision of industrial finance, development of the capital market, as well as fiscal incentives or disincentives to investment and production. It is in this context that we have to understand the evolution of industrial policy in India and know how it has worked as an effective tool to comprehend the objective of planned development. A look through the features of industrial policy will be focused upon. Stages of industrial policy prior to 1991. The model of development and growth and the changes with time demands changes in economic policies and the need to create institutions for successful implementation of policies and to achieve growth. This means involvement of state is essential. Industrial policy and strategy. From the time of second 5 years plan, industry-led growth strategy was adopted, and this strategy was based on the Industrial Policy Resolution, that is IPR of 1956. A number of changes had taken place during this time. So the IPR 1956 laid emphasis on number 1, fast-track expansion of heavy machine industry to lay the groundwork for capital goods industries. Number 2, involve private sector and make them co-partners. Number 3, expand heavy industries base in the public sector. And number 4, promote and enhance growth of cottage and small-scale industries by establishing large cooperative sector. The IPR 1956 was commonly referred to as the Economic Constitution of India, which established a base for cottage and small-scale industries and aimed to enhance their growth. A classification was made specifying industries into different groups while stating that both public and private sector was at the same time anticipated to be a part of the course of industrialization in India. The demarcations of the industries were based on 3 schedules. Schedule A. Barring the industries for which permissions had already been given, 17 new industries to be set up by the state. Schedule B. Private sector industries, that is 12 in number, to be set up with an aim to supplement the efforts of the state. And Schedule C. The developmental initiative was left entirely to the private sector except for the 29 industries mentioned so far. Despite difference, it was always left open to the state to undertake industrial production in any of the areas, keeping the national interest in mind. Industrial licensing. Industrial licensing formed the backbone of state policy. The government initially insisted upon a written permission to an industrial unit, allowing manufacturing of only those goods which were itemized in the permission letter was an important instrument which allowed the state to ensure that the manufacturing units follow the set of rules in place. The government initially insisted upon a written permission to an industrial unit allowing manufacturing of only those goods which were itemized in the permission letter. It was an important instrument which allowed the state to ensure that the manufacturing units follow the set of rules in place. The license allotted to a manufacturing unit basically specified the whereabouts of the unit, including site of the plant, merchandise to be manufactured, period within which the industrial capacity is to be established, etc. The key objective behind licensing was the idea to work in unison or in agreement with the industrial policy. Any important alterations and modifications in industrial policy would need corresponding changes in the framework of industrial licensing. The legislative framework for industrial licensing was represented in 3 different acts. Number 1, Industries Development and Regulation IDR Act 1951. This was ordained to ensure that all industrial units obtain compulsory certificate of registration and new industrial units to be recognized as industrial units only after obtaining a license from the central government. Monopolies and Restrictive Trade Practices, that is MRTP Act 1969. The primary role of this framework was to control and curtail the concentration of economic influence and discourage monopolies. It enforced restrictions on the acquisition and transfer of shares of or by certain corporate bodies, control monopolistic trade practices, and restrict unfair trade practices. Another primary objective was to control monopolistic trade practices by promoting healthy competition. Number 3, Foreign Exchange Regulation Act, that is FERA 1973. This was enacted to control the acquisition of foreign exchange or holding foreign exchange in any form. Basically, FERA 1973 was an extension of the Foreign Exchange Regulation Act 1947. This act empowered the Reserve Bank of India and the central government to ensure that foreign exchange earned by exports or otherwise are properly accounted for. It was obligatory to take the permission from the Reserve Bank of India to carry out any trade activity, either commercial or industrial in nature. Even the purchase of shares of any company required permission, and this scrutiny was applied to any acquisition of any undertaking in India. Phase of liberalization. 4 decades after independence, the industrial landscape underwent a drastic change. The industrial policy's initial approach was to safeguard and protect the Indian industry during the initial stages of development and economic fluctuations. But this approach did not allow the industry to expand and adapt. Therefore, far-reaching expansions to the initial idea were made. Mid-1970s onwards. During mid-1970s, advancements and experimentations within internal trade witnessed liberalization. This decade marked liberation from controls, including an increase in license capacities and ease in licensing restrictions. Licensing policy underwent constant changes and complex features during 1970s and 1980s. Mid-1980s onwards. To keep a check on fiscal, monetary and trade policies, industrial policy was reoriented and gained a push after the mid-1980s. Accelerated growth and an improvement in domestic resources was the primary aim for this momentum. Need for an accelerated growth. To meet the accelerated growth, expansions were made, such as number 1, an improvement in imports meant improvement in production and hence imports was given attention. Number 2, amplified exports to pay for increased imports and avoid risk of heavy debt burden, a trait associated with large-scale commercial borrowings. Number 3, progresses in terms of sharpening the competitive edge of exportable goods. And number 4, revisions in industrial, trade and fiscal policies to increase benefit for exportable goods. Domestic resource condition and the need to improve. There was an urgent need felt to improve the condition of domestic resources, and there are few reasons listed here to understand why this was needed. Number 1, government budgets were no longer enough sources of investment and finances. Number 2, any reduction in defense spending was not an option for the government. Number 3, subsidies can be reduced only at a slow pace to avoid any major social and political hitches. And number 4, now the only way to raise additional funds was to make tax system more comprehensive and ensure that public sector enterprises generate more and more resources. These two proposals were immensely helpful in establishing the role of market and helping expand the concepts like broadbanding, minimum economic capacity and delicensing. Moving further, let's keep in mind that the period beginning with 1985 witnessed development of rule-based industrial policies. This included tax and tariff-based interventions and dual pricing, making direct price, output or capacity controls obsolete. New Industrial Policy 1991. By now, when economic imbalances reached precarious levels, it was understood that the growth strategy pursued earlier was not sustainable as it led to deficit financing. A rise in balance of payments deficit cannot be sustained with domestic resources. All these fluctuations led to a loss of foreign exchange capital and other funds and resources. This was a call to adapt and modify while adopting measures to adjust budgetary deficits. The new amendments and sudden changes led to a slowdown of economy. What added to the problem were resource constraints in the public sector, which could not provide the much-needed support for demand creation. Hope for the revival of growth process was undermined due to the twin deficits, that is, fiscal and balance of payment deficit. This required immediate consideration, and the government responded with a suitable set of macroeconomic policies along with a new industrial policy. The new industrial policy was essentially based on the neoclassical paradigm, which was designed to push growth and help restore macroeconomic and financial stability. A new set of policy structure and new objectives gave birth to a revised policy, and a new industrial policy was announced on July 24, 1991. The principal objective of the new industrial policy, that is NIP 1991, was to amalgamate the assets and advances gained during the 4 decades of economic planning over 1951 to 91 and ensure that the weaknesses, majorly low productivity with high production cost, are paid close attention. The new policy focused on improving and maintaining a sustained growth in industrial productivity with ample employment opportunities. A major area of attention was to achieve international competitiveness. It was also emphasized that these objectives will keep a check on sustainability concerns vis-a-vis protection of environment and efficient use of available resources. Alterations in policy. This section will discuss the major changes in the NIP 1991 and the preceding changes. Industrial licensing policy. Industrial licensing policy. With the new wave, industrial licensing was eliminated for all projects excluding some industries. These industries were primarily those industries which were of security and strategic concern, involved in production of hazardous substances leading to environmental degradation or destruction, etc. These industries were primarily those industries which were of security and strategic concern, involved in production of hazardous substances leading to environmental degradation or destruction, etc. Industries specifically cited to procure industrial licensing are: Number 1. Distilleries and alcoholic drinks breweries. Number 2. Defense equipment, electronic aerospace and defense aircraft. Number 3. Warships. Number 4. Aerospace substitutes. Number 5. Industrial explosives including detonating fuses, safety fuses, gunpowder, nitrocellulose and matches. And number 6. Tobacco products. There were 3 more industry groups exclusively reserved for the public sector. These were recognized due to security and strategic concerns. They were: Number 1. Generation of atomic energy. Number 2. Substances notified by the Department of Atomic Energy. And number 3. Railways, private funds permissible to limited amount. There was no need for permissions and approvals from the central government for any other industries except for the ones mentioned so far. However, it specified the locations of industries based on the level of pollution and distance from the cities with minimum thresholds of population. Foreign investment. The new wave witnessed new features, and some of them are: Number 1. Barring a few sensitive sectors, automatic approval is available to foreign direct investment, that is FDI, in almost all sectors. The industries are classified into groups and automatic approval is available for up to 100% in specified industry groups. Number 2. Companies which are involved in export of Number 2. Companies which are involved in export of products, majority foreign equity holding of up to 51% will be allowed for an easy access to international markets. And number 3, for the purpose of negotiations with international firms and for approval of direct foreign investments, a Foreign Investment Promotion Board was constituted. Foreign technology agreements. For foreign technology agreements in high priority industries, automatic permission be given while on a lump sum payment of $2 million, 5% royalty for domestic sales and 8% for exports. This was subjected to a total payment of 8% of sales over a period of 10 years from the date of agreement or 7 years from commencement of production. For all other industries other than those specifically mentioned, automatic permission will be given subjected to the same guidelines as in cases where no foreign exchange is required for any payment. Public sector. The new policy was a breath of fresh air for public sector. It was specified that public sector investments will be made in strategic areas. Public sector was given more freedom in terms of entering in areas not reserved for it. Also, reservations were made for the public sector. All those public sector enterprises which were in a bad shape had to be referred to the Board of Industrial and Financial Reconstruction, that is BIFR, for revival schemes. Furthermore, attention was given to encourage wider public involvement in order to increase resources. A new view on shareholding was offered. In the public sector, a part of the government's shareholding was open to mutual funds, financial institutions, general public, and workers. MRTP Act. The MRTP Act allowed more freedom in terms of removing pre-entry restrictions, prior approvals from the government for establishing a new undertaking, or while getting involved in amalgamations or merging of industrial units. It also removed the threshold limits of assets in respect of MRTP companies and dominant undertakings. Analysis of the new industrial policy. With advancement and an entry into a new and a more liberalized era, popularly referred to as economies of scale and quality, it was realized that the Indian industry has become far more unstable than earlier. The burden was mostly felt on the marginalized sections of the society. At this point in time, it was important to understand and focus specifically on the weaknesses of the new industrial policy and how the changes made it unstable and weak. Before we proceed, let's understand the strengths first. Announcement of new industrial policy 1991 opened up avenues and liberalization got a robust push with major reforms, but it was also realized that number 1, a suitable export policy was missing. Number 2, distortions in investment patterns. Some industries were booming while others were struggling with a slow pace of investments. Number 3, a bond between new sectors with that of older ones was missing, and thus there was a need realized in order to encourage modernization and new product development. Number 4, modernization, deviations and reformations often lead to displacement of labor. Labor displacement and rehabilitation issues were equally concerning. Number 5, lack of technological and innovative efforts intertwined with an absence of incentives-based policy to encourage efficiency. Number 6, failure to designate or define a proper industrial location policy. And number 7, highly skewed income distribution and its related consequences. The major strengths of the new policy can be identified as: number 1, changes in industrial licensing system were a major breakthrough and a key step towards liberalization. Abolishment of extensive physical controls, lowering of taxes combined with better administration of revenue collection to attract investment were some of the best changes made to achieve growth. It also expanded the role of financial incentives in directing investments. Number 2, for efficiency and to strengthen domestic firms, internal deregulation was encouraged. This is expected to inject much more competition into the system, creating incentives for cost reduction. Number 3, it also looked at strengthening legal framework within the formulation of Reconstruction of Financial Assets and Enforcement of Security Interest Act 2002. This act basically allows banks and financial institutions to enforce their claims on collateral for delinquent secured credit without judicial intervention. Number 4, at the same time, the Competition Act 2003 prohibited anti-competitive practices and abuse of power through healthy competition and regulation of companies beyond a particular size. Number 5, this in turn allowed internal liberalization via open access to imports and other interventions such as technological advancement, modernization, and overall improvement in the industry with an aim to reduce cost and maintain a progressive environment. And number 6, although the system was in pressure to maintain efficiency, advancement, and adapt to modern technological solutions, but the rationale to justify this was the view that pressure commensurate with the ability of the system to respond helps maintain efficiency. However, pressure beyond one's ability will only be disruptive. All in all, the aim of the policy changes aim to introduce an integrated economic package and to create a suitable environment for promotion of efficiency, productivity, and industrial growth through a well-coordinated structure. State-specific industrial policies. With technology and innovation, India is catching up with its global counterpart while pioneering business models and strategies. The state governments have shown immense progress. Policies of states in southern region are a perfect example of how consistent compliant policy helped the region in developing private enterprises and making investments beneficial while nurturing MSMEs. This helped in curtailing unemployment at a drastic rate. The state-specific industrial policies have focused on simplification and developments in the areas like single window clearance, labor regulation, online tax return filing, inspection reform, commercial dispute resolution, availability of land, construction permit, access to information and transparency, obtaining electricity connection, and environment registration. Other important policies focusing on industrial promotion. India, being an agriculture-based economy, has built and helped evolve small-scale enterprises and is known across Asia and the world for building the most elaborate development programs for small enterprises and for providing assistance both on an individual and institutional level. These developmental programs are not confined to certain areas but have been rolled out both for urban as well as rural settings. With an era of advancement during the post-reform period, the focus shifted to promotion and upgradation. The quest for promotion demanded modernization of small-scale industry units and improvement in quality of output and technological advancement, which needed massive funding. Therefore, access to technology, finances, and innovation were few prerequisites to sustain competition. Moreover, access to marketing opportunities and assistance in marketing are key requisites apart from these three core areas, which are quality, finance, and technology. So, a broad policy package was announced for small-scale industry in March 1994. These new sets of policies were based on the recommendations of S.P. Gupta Committee with inputs from others in June 1998. The success of the new SSI policy was intertwined with many other linked schemes such as quality control, technology upgradation, introduction of better marketing schemes, besides single window clearance scheme for composite loans, etc. To ensure this, various other policies played an important role. The competition policy was an important intervention to ensure healthy competition and promotion of SSIs. Competition policy. As discussed earlier, there were many constraints on competition in the pre-reform era. They were: number 1, apply for and procure license, which restrained investments. Number 2, restrictions to enter for new enterprises. Number 3, there were restrictions on acquisition of economic control through MRTP. Number 4, widespread monopolies due to reservation for public sector and other industries. Number 5, small-scale industries were under constraints of product reservation. Number 6, high tariffs and other policy interventions to restrict trade. And number 7, foreign direct investments were under strict scrutiny. For a healthy competitive environment and to ensure efficient production, two factors were recognized as vitally important. One was to allow Indian players become independent and competitive globally, and second was to create an accessible atmosphere in the domestic market. This was introduced to help increase competitive edge of Indian players and boost competitive strength of Indian economy. To achieve this, encouraging competition to achieve efficiency, better allocation of resources, and at the same time ensuring consumer well-being was the key. This can be achieved only when other policies and laws are in sync. To bring the different aspects of economic growth and to ensure strong market presence, a single law was much needed which could help bring mutually supporting laws, other economic policies and institutional structures under one umbrella, including those relating to FDI, infrastructure, and international trade. It was realized that there was an urgent need to promote competition in view of the international developments. This necessitated comprehensive design, thinking, and a policy structure in place. So, under the chairmanship of Shri S.V.S. Raghavan, the Government of India set up a 9-member committee in October 1999 to recommend a judicial and administrative framework. On recommendation of the expert committee, the government passed the Competition Act 2003, replacing the MRTP Act. This came into existence with the key aim of supporting and promoting competition while prohibiting anti-competitive practices. The Competition Commission of India, that is CCI, was soon established and set up under the Competition Act 2003 with an aim to promote spirited competition while preventing abuse of dominance. Some major objectives of the Competition Commission of India are: number 1, to stop practices which adversely affect competition. Number 2, encourage and endure competition in market. Number 3, ensure quality of products and services is up to mark. Number 4, consumer welfare. And number 5, allow freedom of trade in the markets of India. For CCI to work as a market regulator, other bills were passed, such as the Competition Amendment Bill 2007. Good quality products and services are available. Number 2, promote fair and healthy competition. Number 3, easy and fast mergers and acquisitions. Number 4, regulation of acquisitions and mergers within the threshold limits. And number 5, preventing abuse while allowing control. Despite concerns, the new competition law in India is based on a robust competitive market model which is consistent and in sync with fresh competition ready to meet the new challenges. India appears to have taken a significant step, but the measurement of success depends on implementation. The Special Economic Zone, that is SEZ Act 2006. The Special Economic Zone Act 2006 emphasized on the development of specific areas for promoting manufacturing and exports. The main incentives are: number 1, duty-free import of capital goods, raw materials, consumables and spares. Number 2, tax exemption on export profits for the first 5 years. Number 3, exemption from minimum alternate tax, that is MAT. Number 4, goods purchased from domestic tariff area, that is DTA, are exempted from sales and service tax. Number 5, exemption from stamp duty, registration fee and electricity duty. Number 6, no tax on income from dividends and long-term capital gains tax. And number 7, 100% FDI allowed for developers. Now let's summarize the unit. India opted for industrial development and initially conceived the Industrial Policy Resolution 1948. Industries Development and Regulation Act 1951, referred to as IDR Act, was also enacted to keep abreast with national development objectives. To achieve sustainable growth, the policy explored prospects to deregulate Indian industry while easing restrictions. Since 1991, economic reforms envisioned a new and substantial role for private entities. Since Industrial Policy Resolution IPR of 1956, industry-led growth strategy was adopted and led to involvement of private sector, expansion of heavy industries base in the public sector, and further promoting and enhancing growth of cottage and small-scale industries by establishing large cooperative sector. In 1991, when economic imbalances reached precarious levels, it was understood that the growth strategy pursued earlier was not sustainable as it led to deficit financing. A new set of policy structure and new objectives gave birth to a revised policy and a new industrial policy 1991. The principal objective of the new industrial policy 1991 was to amalgamate the assets and advances gained during the 4 decades of economic planning over 1951 to 91 and ensure that the weaknesses, majorly low productivity with high production cost, are paid close attention. The new policy focused on improving and maintaining a sustained growth in industrial productivity with ample employment opportunities. With technology and innovation, the state governments have shown immense progress. Southern region is a perfect example of how consistent, compliant policy helped the region in developing private enterprises and making investments beneficial while nurturing MSMEs. This helped in curtailing unemployment at a drastic rate. With an era of advancement during the post-reform period, the focus shifted to promotion and upgradation. The quest for promotion demanded modernization of SSI units, an improvement in quality of output, and technological advancement which needed massive funding. Therefore, access to technology, finances, and innovation were few prerequisites to sustain competition. Moreover, access to marketing opportunities and assistance in marketing are key requisites apart from these three core areas, which are quality, finance, and technology. You were listening to the audiobook by the School of Management Studies IGNOU for MBA program. Course code MMPC 002 Human Resource Management. Course Coordinator Professor Nayantara Padhi from School of Management Studies IGNOU. Voiceover by Harpreet Kaur. Edited by Jagbandhu Jana. Program assisted by Tarannum Jahan. Program produced by Dr. Manoj Kumar Singh. This program was brought to you by Electronic Media Production Center of Indira Gandhi National Open University.